So just a real quick overview of the Tokyo trials and censorship in Japan after the U.S. started to occupy. Alright, so there's definitely three people whose names you should know if you are going to be looking at Tokyo trials. There's Douglas MacArthur, who's the occupation commander. Joseph Keenan, who's an American. He's the head prosecutor during the Tokyo trials. And Sir William Webb from Australia, who was the tribunal president. So the start of it. It all goes back to the Potsdam Declaration in 1945, which said that those who deceived and misled the Japanese people into the war they were criminals, and they would be put on trial. As soon as he's able to, MacArthur orders the arrest of dozens of people, most of whom, at first, that he targets are Tojo's kind of key guys, as well as Tojo himself. He also, MacArthur, he approves the list of all the judges who are going to hear the case. We get judges from all the Allied groups. So there's America, Soviet Union, France, Philippines, Canada, China, India, New Zealand, Great Britain, Netherlands, Australia. They make a key decision of, let's get some Asian people onto the court system here. They specifically wanted to have a show of that. This will cause some problems, especially with the judge from India. If you research this, I'll talk about it in a minute. So here is a picture of the judges all lined up. The trial begins in May of 1946. There's three charges that are applied to people who were brought before the tribunal. There's the Class A war criminals. These are people who committed crimes against peace. Now that kind of, that could be just about anybody who fought in the war. So it's a very broad definition. Then you had your Class B, your conventional war crimes, and you had C, the crimes against humanity. Some people who were brought before the tribunal had multiple A and B, B and C, A, B, and C as their charges. So it took the prosecution 192 days to present their case. Then the defense took 225 days to present their case. One thing that you should really get out of this is it took a really long time for the Tokyo Tribunal. And it was very much stacked against the Japanese people. Things that would never have been allowed in any court, really, were allowed into these cases. Hearsay, things from people who were long dead were brought in. Evidence that very well may have been just made that day was brought in, and so all of these objectionable stuff was brought in. Didn't really matter what kind of evidence it was, as long as it was something against the people who were on trial. Some of the judges commented on it, that it was hard to sit through all this stuff that should never have been allowed, but it was allowed. Some of the judges also argued the tribunal was unlawful, and they have stated point blank that they were disgusted by the tribunal, by the whole court case. One of the strongest advocates for this being a sham, that this was not lawful, was the judge from India, if memory serves. But the U.S. had a bit of a problem. If they listened to these arguments that the case was, or that the War Crimes Tribunal was not legal, they've already done a War Crimes Tribunal in Germany. And so, if they listen to this case, that's going to create all sorts of problems for what they've already done. So, they just kind of ignore those lawyers and the judges. It ends in 48. That's when November of 48, the sentences were declared. In December, that's when the death sentences were carried out. 7 people were hanged by the neck until dead, including Tojo himself. There were 16 sentences of life in prison, 2 sentences of less than life, 1 sentence of insanity. Or sorry, not sentence of insanity. 1 person was declared insane, and so he, more or less, he was committed, and then not too long after that, he was released. 2 people died during the trial. One thing before I move on. There are all sorts of sources you can find online if you want to know more about the Tokyo tribe. In fact, Netflix has one of those documentary reenactments which has real footage mixed into it that I thought was really quite well done about the Tokyo trials. I can't recall the name of it right off the top of my head right now, but if you send me an email, I'll let you know what that was called, or just Google it. You'll probably come up with it even faster than emailing me. All right, so censorship. Officially, MacArthur was in charge of the censorship, but he was so busy doing so much stuff that I don't know how much he actually oversaw himself and how much was the people below him. But all right, so there were 2 types of censorship going on in Japan. And if you read the interview with the author of Barefoot Gen, he talks about the perceived censorship, that editors and publishers would refuse to do certain stories or certain books or whatever because they believed it would violate the censorship rules. Whether they actually would have or not, things were censored because of a perception rather than a real actual censorship. And then there was the real censorship. So newspapers, books, radio, even crimes committed by American soldiers were censored. Mentioning the censorship was also censored, so you couldn't even talk about the censorship. Kind of amusing. If you have read this book, I believe you can download PDF copies for free from the NCTA program. I'm not 100% sure about that. But if you have this book, I pulled this quote here from the pages 434, 435 from the 5th edition of it. All Japanese publications were censored, as was all information coming into or out of Japan. Foreign journalists risked expulsion if what they wrote offended. The worst transgression against free speech was its total cover-up of the effects of the atomic bombing, where thousands continued to die of radiation sickness long after the explosions. It was forbidden to report any of this. So, censorship goes far beyond what the author talks about, the author of Barefoot Gen talks about in his interview that you should have access to online. It goes into just about every aspect of Japanese society. If you have any questions, as always, just email me and I'll get back to you.